is the IRS. According to its website, the IRS has issued all first, second, and third economic impact payments. And an IRS spokesperson confirms to 10 TV, the answer is no. We can verify there are no plans at this time for a fourth stimulus check. It would take an act of Congress, and so far that has not happened. But many are calling on lawmakers to...
So we got some bad news, everybody, for Social Security, SSI, SSDI, SSA, and even other types of stimulus aid. First of all, nearly 60 million Americans, many of whom ages 62 and over, received a Social Security benefit. For the 50 million who are retired workers, these payouts are widely viewed as a necessity to cover the expenses. What I mean by that is that despite providing a financial foundation for our nation's retirees, America's top retirement program finds itself in deep trouble. Joe Biden believes he has a solution that can resolve what hails as Social Security, but he's going to need help from the newly elected members in Congress to fix this problem. For each of the past 83 years, the Social Security Board of Trustees has released a report that's examined the financial status of the program over the short term, which is 10 years, and long term, which is 75 years. The trustees report effectively acts as Social Security's balance sheets and allows anybody to see how the revenue is collected and where the dollars end up. So something about this is going wrong. The 2022 trustees report showed that Social Security has dug itself in its largest hole yet, an estimated $20 trillion funding shortfall through 2096. For what it's worth, every trustees report since '85 has projected a long-term shortfall, and Social Security's increasingly dire financial footing is primarily a result of democratic shifts. So, examples including historically low U.S. birth rates, a near having a net immigration to the country, and a lot of payroll tax, lots of payroll tax, because in 2023, Social Security 12.4% payroll tax is applicable to earned income between a penny and 160 grand. That's not very good.
A survey by the New York Times found that just 17% of Americans said their wages had kept up with inflation. Mr. President, the White House Chief of Staff may think inflation is, quote, a high-class problem. But for the mom at the grocery store wondering if she can afford to buy ground beef this week, or for the young worker just starting out who's wondering if she can afford to fill up her car, inflation is a very real problem. Americans are struggling. They're facing huge price increases at the grocery store, huge price increases at the gas pump, big increases in the cost of household goods like furniture and bedding and laundry equipment, massive increases in the cost of fuel oil and gas service, higher electric bills, and on and on. Inflation is weighing down businesses too, from larger businesses to family farms and ranches. A recent survey from the National Federation of Independent Business found that 22% of small businesses consider inflation to be the biggest challenge facing their business. A 20-point increase from the beginning of 2021. A 20-point increase. It's no wonder that 69% of Americans disapprove of the president's handling of inflation, and 56% disapprove of his handling of the economy. Mr. President, inflation is a major burden for American families and businesses, a fact that seems utterly lost on members of the Democrat Party. While American families struggle, Democrats' focus is on anything but inflation. What's worse, many Democrats are still hoping to pass elements of their reckless tax and spending spree, the so-called Build Back Better plan, despite the fact that it was a bloated Democrat spending spree that helped get us into this inflation mess in the first place. Yes, while the pandemic created inflationary pressure.
While legislatures in Maryland and Georgia temporarily paused the gasoline tax in their states, Iowa, Indiana, and Idaho have all slashed income taxes this year. The push to lower taxes comes as consumers grapple with the highest inflation in nearly 40 years. The government reported last week that the Consumer Price Index jumped 8.3% in April, far faster than economists expected. Consumer Price Index is a broad measure that tracks the price of goods including healthcare, rent, and gasoline. And according to multiple sources, on average, Americans are shelling out an extra $311 a month on goods and services just because of inflation. The final squeeze stems from the rising cost of a number of everyday goods, including cars, rent, food, and gasoline. Folks, we have a ton of good news about the fourth stimulus check, Social Security benefits, SSI and Ssdi. Stay tuned because you don't want to miss out on this, and here's the most important information that I want you to know. Now, stimulus checks are coming soon for one state. Illinois is pushing ahead with rumored plans to issue statewide stimulus checks in its latest budget. At the start of the month, Illinois State Senate Democrats proposed $1.8 billion in tax cuts that would include stimulus checks for nearly all of the residents. Illinois governor has promised tax relief in this year's budget. Part of that relief will come in the form of a check directly to your mailbox, unlike a stimulus check sent out by the federal government in the early stages of the crisis. Now, those who filed taxes independently in 2021 and made under $200,000 will be getting at least a $50 check in the mail. Joint filers who brought home less than $400,000 in 2021 will get a $100 check. The state will send individuals even more if they have dependents. This increases the total dollar amount by $100 for each independent. It caps at 3. However, that means the max amount of money an individual filer could get is $350. The governor has already signed the budget, meaning those checks are coming, and all of the data are determined by 2021 tax filings. Now, in a new report by the U.S. Census Bureau, the number of people living in poverty decreased when crisis stimulus payments were factored in. The official poverty measure, which is determined by the Census Bureau, indicated that 11.4% of Americans were living in poverty, an increase of 1 percentage point in 2020. The increase was the first after 5 consecutive years of decline. But when looking at a more complete, supplemental measure of poverty, which factored in streams of income like stimulus payments, which were issued by the government to ease the economic recession, it found that the number of people in poverty actually decreased. Robert Greenstein, founder of the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, said the decrease from stimulus checks was proof that the government can help poverty levels. He said for people who have a cynical view that nothing much government does work effectively, it will be harder to maintain the view. Now, the crisis shutdown sent tremors throughout the economy last year. In April alone, more than 20 million workers lost their jobs. Unemployment offices paid out an average of 20 million claims last year, and the economy has rebounded since. But employment is still at about 5 million jobs, below pre-crisis levels. Congress did their part though, passing 5 bipartisan crisis response bills last year, totaling close to $3.5 trillion, and signed into law. But President Biden's current economic plan extends tax credits for families with children, which is seen as a strategy for reducing child poverty and its long-term consequences. Lawmakers are continuing to push for the permanent expansion of the monthly child tax credit payments. For more than 8 years, the Colorado senator has been trying to expand child tax credits and uplift people out of poverty. The American Rescue Plan finally expanded the child tax credit for another year, making it fully refundable. The poorest families could benefit from this, and for the last half of 2021, it's sent in the form of monthly checks to families.
Identifying the critical issues that are going to have to be addressed, whether that's impacts on water, impacts on species at risk, or indigenous concerns, which are a very, very important part of our process in Canada. Trying to ensure that we're isolating the big issues early on and working to try to address those so that you're not 5 years into a process when you run into the wall where there are significant concerns that haven't been addressed. Those are things that, while